my dears, and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon. This back here over my shoulder, that's Bernard. He's my October co-host. He's very shy, but he's happy to be here, and most days I'm happy to have him here. Anyway, today I'm going to be sharing with you my favorite scary movies, perfect for this time of year. The majority of these are currently, as I'm filming this, on Netflix. At least Netflix Canada. Of course, I can't say 100% sure if they're on American or other countries' Netflix, but as of right now, they're on Canadian Netflix, and hopefully they're on yours too. So I have 10 movies that I want to talk about today, plus one honorable mention. And they're all really good, sort of spine-tingling films. Some rely more on jump scares than others, because I'm not really big into jump scares. I prefer a scary movie that has a bit more of a subtle touch to it. So this is a mix of both of those kinds. So we'll start with the ones that are not on Netflix, just to kind of get those out of the way. These are kind of my all-time favorites. The first one that I feel any list would be remiss to not mention, and that is The Shining by Stanley Kubrick, based on the book by Stephen King. If you've read the book and seen the film, you know that there's many differences, but the basic story stays the same. This movie I saw for the first time when I was probably, I want to say 14 or 15, and it scared the crap out of me. The absolute crap out of me. I read it a few years later, and that terrified me as well. It's one of those movies that my husband and I both love watching, and so we watch it pretty much every October. We haven't watched it yet. We're saving it for a little closer to Halloween, but it scares me. There's just always something when there's haunting stories, you know, like a haunted house, a haunted hotel in this case, and the way that the movies show it to affect a person's psyche, that really just rattles me to my core. So if you're unfamiliar, but you're probably not, but if you are unfamiliar, The Shining is about a family that moves into an isolated Colorado hotel to take care of it during the winter when it's closed to the public. The dad is a writer named Jack. He thinks it's going to be a great opportunity for him to catch up on some work. And then his son Danny is a sensitive. He's very sensitive to paranormal energies around him. And the hotel just wreaks havoc on the both of them. Danny more from the feeling things and seeing things side. Jack more from the being manipulated by the house side. It's number one. And keeping with the Stephen King theme, one of my, I would say my second top favorite scary movie is 1408. 1408 is based on a short story by Stephen King, and it's also about a haunted hotel. The movie stars John Cusack, one of my all-time favorites, and Samuel L. Jackson, and that's pretty much it. Most of the movie is John Cusack alone in a hotel room. And I always find when someone's sort of given that situation where it's just them and a room for the entirety of a movie, you really kind of get to see what their acting is really all about, and I loved that. Again, this is absolutely terrifying. John Cusack plays a writer who doesn't really believe in the paranormal, but he wants to. He wants to believe because a few years ago his daughter passed away, and he wants to know that there's an afterlife. He wants to know that there's something else that comes after and that she's okay and she's somewhere. So he decides to go to the most haunted hotel in the world. Samuel L. Jackson is kind of like the manager at this hotel, and he really encourages John Cusack to not spend the night in room 1408. But there's really no talking him out of it, and he spends the night, and it gets real intense real quickly. It's so good. If you haven't seen it, I 100% recommend. Now, the rest of these movies, they aren't really in any particular order. They're just kind of in the order that they came to me. Next up at number 3, we have The Conjuring. I love that movie. The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2, they're both fantastic. I kind of went into that movie with not really high expectations, and I was blown away. It's kind of based on Ed and Lorraine Warren. And if you're not familiar with their lives, they were kind of dedicated to the paranormal, to helping people who thought they were possessed or homes that were possessed or haunted. Just really excellent. excellent movie. There's a lot of controversy around them in real life, you know, if they were truly what they claimed they were, or if they were scams. I mean, to me the work kind of speaks for itself, but, you know, lots of people have lots of different feelings on it. Next up, we have Funny Games. Funny Games is a very, very, very interesting film. This version of, the American version of Funny Games came out, I think, around 2011, 2012, and it was a scene-by-scene remake of I believe, a Dutch film of the same name, and like I said, it was a scene-by-scene remake. And this movie is super scary. It's about two young boys that are, like, psychotic. They're out of their minds. This movie starts off with a family going to their summer home for the summer. Naomi Watts plays the mom, and they're getting settled in, and then shortly thereafter there comes a knock at the door, and there's two young men there, Michael Pitt being one of the men. At first it starts off fairly innocently with them asking questions, but then it gets more and more intense, and these boys won't leave the family alone. Again, there's not a lot of characters in this movie. There's the two boys and then this family, and they're just kind of inside the house for the whole movie. And there's this thing that happens throughout the film, and it's called breaking the fourth wall. And what they do is the characters, these two psychotic young boys, will talk directly to the audience watching the film. And there's something about that makes it very eerie. With this movie, there's no supernatural elements, there's no paranormal, there's nothing. It's just two unhinged, crazy young men who are out for blood just for the fun of it, hence the title Funny Games. Super creepy. Next up are my Netflix selections. Of course, I don't have to say this here because I did a whole video on it, but if you haven't seen The Haunting of Hill House, that's a great place to start on Netflix, and that's a Netflix original, so it would definitely be on all Netflixes, which is nice. But let's get into the movies. The first one that I loved that's on there is Sinister, and that stars Ethan Hawke. I feel like Ethan Hawke went away for a long time. He was such kind of a grungy heartthrob in the 90s, and then he kind of just disappeared, but now he's back. This one's about a family that moves into a new home. Once they move in, they find a box of grisly home videos that show a bunch of different just horrific acts that happened in the house. And from there, it just kind of becomes a haunted house story. You know I love those. So I would definitely recommend that if you haven't seen it already. Next up is Hush. This is a film that was made by Mike Flanagan, who made The Haunting of Hill House. And the actress who played Theo in The Haunting of Hill House, she's the main actress in this film. Again, this is another one where it's really just two actors and that's it. These two actors, they're kind of alone in a house. Well, one's kind of inside the house, one's outside the house. So this film's about a woman who's deaf and she's alone in her home. And she becomes the target of a home invasion, but of course she can't hear anything. So for a while we know what's happening, she doesn't because she can't hear it. And there's a lot of tension. And it's got that element of this could actually happen, which makes it extra scary, you know. And Mike Flanagan, he's an amazing storyteller. He puts a lot of heart into his scary films, which I love. And she's a fantastic actress. So if you haven't seen that, definitely recommend. Next up is The Witch. This isn't going to be for everyone. It's a little different, but it's really good. It's about a bunch of people, I guess, homesteaders you'd call them, who live on this property, and they begin to get very paranoid, and it's just, again, it's a ton of atmosphere, and I love that in a film. And this one's a bit hard for me to describe without having to go too in depth with it. So it's not going to be for everybody, like I said. It's a bit arty that some people aren't really going to like in their horror films, and it's just a different kind of horror film. So if you've been recommended this before by someone who knows your taste and knows you'd probably like it, but you've put off watching it, here is me echoing their sentiment and telling you to go and watch it. Another film that's got a little bit of an art house feel to it is I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House. And this one's a bit slow. It moves a little slow, but to me the payoff at the end is really good. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was really beautiful. I loved the colors and the feelings and just that blanket of unease. Again, it's a bit of a haunting story, but I really enjoyed it. Again, not super scary. There might be 1 or 2 jump scares. I honestly can't even remember in particular if there were. So that tells me that there probably wasn't too many, or I would have remembered. Like, one film we tried to watch last year was Insidious 3. We had watched the first 2 and liked them. When we got to Insidious 3, I had to turn it off after we were about 20 minutes in because it was just jump scare after jump scare after jump scare, and there wasn't much else. Like, there was no time to set up any sort of story or plot to make me care because they were just constantly trying to spook you. And that's not my thing. If you want a sort of just kind of classic spooky story, The Babadook is on Netflix. I love that film a lot. It came out about 3 years ago, I believe, and it's just kind of a classic horror story. It's about this young mom and her child. They live in a house and they come across this book. It's like a bedtime story about the Babadook. And when they start reading it, weird things start happening in the house. And it's just kind of one of those stories, and it's really fun. I liked it a lot more than I thought I was going to. I kind of went in with really low expectations. Next up, if you love a good gothic haunted house story, Crimson Peak is on Netflix, and it's fantastic. It stars Tom Hiddleston and the really beautiful young girl who also played in Alice in Wonderland, whose name I can't remember right now. But Shannon from the future, if you can remember, could you tell us? Yeah, sure, of course. Her name is Mia Wasikowska. And it's beautiful. I love that costumes and the atmosphere and the lighting. And, I mean, Tom Hiddleston, right? You can't really go wrong. You can't really. And, it's not really a horror film. It's more of a bit of a thriller and also a gothic love story. So if you're interested in something like that, I would definitely recommend, because, I mean, Tom Hiddleston, right? So those are the 10 films. The honorable mention that I wanted to mention is Scream. Just went up on Netflix a couple of days ago, and the night that it came out, me and my daughter sat down and watched it together, because Scream was one of the first, I think, horror movies that I saw in theaters when I was around her age when it came out. I think it came out like 94, 95, or 96, I don't know, 90 something. So I would have been about, 15, 16, and I had so much fun with it, and so I wanted to watch it with her. And this was one of the first scary movies that she saw, so it seemed kind of fitting in a film that was kind of representative with the fashion and the time frame of when I went to high school. So that was pretty fun, and she enjoyed it. Again, it's not super scary. To me, it's the first scene that's the most intense of the whole film, but it's such a classic, and I was really excited when they put that up there. Anyway, you guys, I think that's going to do it for me and Bernard for today, but I hope you enjoyed this. But let me know down in the comments below, what are some of your favorite scary, spooky October movies? Also, what are some of your favorite just Halloween movies? I would have to say my 2 favorite Halloween movies are Practical Magic, one of my favorite witch stories, and also Hocus Pocus. So let me know down below, what are your favorites? Anyway, I hope you have a fantastic day. I hope you had a great weekend, and I will see you on Wednesday with a Tea Talk video. Bye, guys.